Welcome back. Looks like you couldn't stay away. Well, we're going to get into the hidden truths of gamer shame. We've all experienced it before. A single moment of panicked stupidity in a multiplayer game that will forever live in the annals of our mind as a giant red-faced stain of, I can't believe I did that. These moments are embarrassing, sure, but why do they hurt so bad? Why do we ruminate over them long after our teammates have forgotten? And why is there no escape? If you're looking for a quick fix or a simple answer, well, I'm afraid this isn't the video for you. But if you're interested in a slow, personal unraveling of a very specific kind of pain, then stick around. We'll get to the bottom of this together. Or not, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna talk about it anyway. Let's go. Okay, so the first thing we need to discuss is the difference between feeling embarrassed and feeling ashamed. Because while both emotions can manifest in a similar way, their origins are fundamentally different. To simplify things a little bit, when we feel embarrassed, we might think we've done something wrong or stupid, but generally speaking, we know objectively that we haven't. Like if someone walked in on you practicing your guitar and you were really bad, you would probably feel embarrassed. Your initial thought might be, oh my God, people heard me play and now they think I'm terrible. But after some time to reflect, you'd realize, well, it's true, I am a bit rusty, but I'm also getting better and those 3 chords I learned last week were pretty catchy. So yes, you were bad, but it wasn't the end of the world. Shame, on the other hand, is a whole other animal because when we feel ashamed, we don't just think we've done something wrong, we feel like we are something that's wrong. If the same person walked in on you practicing your guitar and you were really bad, you might feel ashamed. Your initial thought might be, oh my God, people heard me play and now they think I'm terrible. And then your second thought would be, oh my God, I'm terrible. There's something wrong with me that I can't play guitar well. I should never try playing in front of anyone ever again. In short, shame is far more damaging to our sense of self than embarrassment. And unfortunately, we all carry the weight of centuries of social conditioning that has instilled shame as one of our primary emotions. Think back to ancient Greece, for example, where public shame was used as a tool of social control. Picture this, you're at the theater watching a tragedy unfold, witnessing the downfall of a hero through a series of missteps and bad decisions until inevitably they meet a gruesome demise. This is catharsis. The purging of emotions through art, but also the purging of emotions in life. As the audience watched these tragedies play out, they were encouraged to actively participate, to laugh at the misfortunes of others, to revel in their pain. Being laughed at or shamed publicly by your peers carried significant weight. It was a form of social currency, one that could make or break reputations. Fast forward to medieval Europe, where public shaming took on new heights, literally. In the town squares of medieval Europe, criminals were paraded through the streets, often naked or wearing humiliating costumes, forced to endure the jeers and taunts of onlookers. Think stocks, branding, pillory, the full 9 yards. Now, imagine being paraded through the town square for everyone to see. You're stripped of your dignity, exposed and vulnerable for the entire community to judge and ridicule. It was a spectacle meant to reinforce societal norms and punish those who dared to break them. People would gather from miles around to witness these spectacles, eager to absorb the humiliation of others as entertainment. So you might be wondering what any of this has to do with gamers today. Well, you see, gaming is more than just a pastime. It's a community, and with any community comes a desire for acceptance and belonging. In order to maintain that sense of community, we develop a shared set of values and beliefs that dictate how we behave towards one another. And when someone breaks those norms, the response is often swift and brutal. Take, for instance, the rise of the You Suck or YSK channel, which became wildly popular in the early 2000s. This channel was dedicated to showcasing the most humiliating moments from various video games, often involving unsuspecting players being mercilessly trolled or exploited by their peers. These clips were not just funny. They were a form of entertainment that capitalized on the schadenfreude of watching others suffer. The internet provided a platform for people to share and celebrate these humiliating moments like never before. And let's be honest, we've all been guilty of watching and enjoying these videos ourselves. After all, human beings have a natural curiosity about the misfortunes of others. It's why reality TV shows like Cops and Judge Judy have been staples of our airwaves for decades. Now consider the streamer cringe compilations that have become commonplace on YouTube. These compilations gather moments from Twitch streams where the streamer makes a fool of themselves, gets trolled by viewers, or witnesses some particularly unfortunate events happen on stream. Some of these clips are harmless, some are a bit mean-spirited. But in every case, they contribute to a culture of ridicule and mockery. Viewers tune in to laugh at the streamer's expense, reveling in their discomfort. And the streamers, well, they know that this is part of the territory. They're often self-aware and even encourage the ribbing as a form of bonding with their audience. But here's the kicker. While streamers might seem like they're just rolling with the punches, taking the ribbing in stride, the truth is that this constant barrage of mockery takes a toll on their mental health. Studies show that exposure to cyberbullying and online harassment can lead to symptoms of depression, anxiety, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's not just the streamers, it affects all of us. The anonymity of the internet allows people to be incredibly cruel and heartless, saying things that they would never dream of saying in person. This can have a profound impact on a person's self-esteem, body image, and overall mental health. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The internet has also given rise to a culture of outrage, where people are quick to jump on whatever controversy train is passing by. This can result in witch hunts where people are publicly shamed and ridiculed for the most trivial of reasons. Suddenly someone's career might be ruined by a tweet that was taken out of context, or a meme that offended someone's sensibilities. This constant climate of public ridicule and scrutiny is not healthy. It doesn't allow for growth, understanding, or empathy. Instead, it creates a breeding ground for insecurity, anxiety, and shame. Ultimately, we all pay the price for this toxic environment. So yeah, the next time you find yourself laughing at a YSK clip or a streamer cringe compilation, take a moment to ask yourself, am I contributing to the problem? Because while these videos might be entertaining, they're also harmful. And by perpetuating this cycle of ridicule and mockery, we're all becoming desensitized to the pain that it causes. We're normalizing public shaming and making it seem like an acceptable way to deal with conflict or express disagreement. In an age where everything we do is constantly scrutinized and judged, it's more important than ever to remember the power of empathy and understanding. We should strive to create an environment where people feel safe and supported, not shamed and ridiculed. It's time to move beyond the cheap laughs and fleeting entertainment of public shaming and embrace a more compassionate and empathetic way of interacting with one another. You know, those moments when you see a streamer do or say something cringeworthy and you find yourself cringing along with their fans in chat, even though you don't really know them or really even like their content? Or how about those times where you come across an old clip of a streamer doing something even worse and you can't help but feel a sense of shame wash over you, even though you had no part in what was done? It might seem silly on the surface, but there's a reason why these moments stick with us so strongly. A reason why we laugh at ourselves and others, and a reason why we can still feel embarrassed even when it has nothing to do with us. And believe it or not, it goes much deeper than you think. So let's start by looking at what exactly it is we're dealing with here. Because although we use the term gamer cringe pretty loosely nowadays, it's actually a very real phenomenon that extends far beyond just awkward clips or out-of-touch hot takes. We could be talking about the guy who spent thousands of dollars to get an IRL girlfriend, only to be rejected within seconds. The infamous Twitch streamer who decided to play GTA San Andreas in a crowd, or anyone who danced in public while playing VR chat. But the thing is, most of the time we aren't cringing because of what we're seeing, but because of how we are perceiving it. Because although you may not know that guy who got friend-zoned, or the guy dancing in VR chat, you probably know the feeling of being made fun of or humiliated in front of your peers. And when you see someone else go through that, whether it's intentional or not, you can't help but feel the visceral reaction kick in. You may not remember the specifics of when it happened to you, but your brain still remembers the feeling. So when you see someone else experience it, you react to that feeling coming up again instead of to what's happening in the moment. In fact, this is exactly what happens whenever we relive any memory, both good or bad. When we think back on our 21st birthday or our first date, we aren't thinking back on the specific details of what happened. We're thinking back on how we felt. We look at photos or videos and don't really remember the details of that day. We just remember how we felt. And when we see someone else experiencing that same emotion, it triggers that same feeling inside of us. This is what makes gamer cringe so powerful. It's not about the actions themselves, but about what they make us feel. And if we take that a step further, we can see why certain feelings stick with us long after we've forgotten the moment they came from. There's a specific reason why we are the way we are, a reason why we feel so strongly about things. And to understand that, we have to look back even further, much further. We all want to be remembered, but survival wasn't always about leaving behind a legacy. In fact, most of human history, it was about the opposite. For the vast majority of our existence, survival meant keeping low profile. And for much of human history, death wasn't something you necessarily expected or worried about. Instead, life expectancy was low and childhood was brutal. There's an old theory that humans didn't used to think of childhood as a special time at all. Instead, children were seen as tiny adults that needed to learn the ways of the tribe as fast as possible. This idea is known as the original affluent childhood hypothesis, which suggests that hunter-gatherer children were free to explore and learn about the world around them without much supervision. Children were seen as little researchers who helped the group by gathering food and experimenting with new technologies. In short, childhood was a time for learning and preparing for the harsh realities of adult life. And I'm not gonna lie, this sounds like a horrible time. But the point is, death wasn't something people really worried about. They died young from disease, starvation, or other accidents. But that wasn't something to worry about because the same thing would happen to everyone. It wasn't until civilization began developing that death became something to worry about. As society progressed and people lived longer lives, the fear of death also grew. People began to believe that death was something that could be avoided or cheated. And as a result, the desire to leave behind a legacy became more important. It wasn't enough to simply live your life. Now you had to live it well and make sure people remembered you for it. And if you didn't, well, that was something to be ashamed of. Of course, this is a huge generalization and varies greatly depending on culture and region. But generally speaking, this is the trend throughout history. And nowhere is that more true than with the Vikings. The whole point of being a Viking wasn't just to raid and pillage, but to build up your reputation as a warrior. The more famous you were, the better your chances were of securing resources and finding a wife. In fact, a poor Viking could pay for a costly funeral by murdering someone of high status. If he survived, he would gain fame and fortune. If he died, his family would receive the payment regardless. That's just how important reputation was. And that leads us to our first story. Norse warriors used to brag about their kills in a drinking song called a skald. And when they died, they wanted those songs to be sung about them to tell their story and keep their memory alive. These songs often included boasting and hyperbole, as warriors would exaggerate their strength and bravery. However, there was a price to pay for bragging too much. If another warrior could prove that you were lying, then they could challenge you to a duel. But there was an even bigger problem. What if you weren't famous? What if you were a nobody who died in battle without anyone knowing? Well, that was a much worse fate than dying and having your name be sung about. Because when you died without any recognition, you would be thrown in a mass grave with hundreds of other soldiers. No ceremony, no prayers, no songs, no remembrance at all. Imagine being proud of your accomplishments in life, thinking that you'll be remembered for what you did. Then you die, only to be buried in a shallow hole with no one singing about your deeds. Your accomplishments mean nothing now. No one will ever know about them. And that is truly shameful. And that's the reason why when we watch streamers make fools of themselves, it feels like more than just watching someone make a mistake. We're watching them disappear into a shallow grave. Their accomplishments and past achievements don't matter because no one will ever know about them. And that brings us back to the present day. Because in a way, Twitch streamers are in the perfect position to study this phenomenon. I mean, just think about it. People go on Twitch knowing that everything they do is being recorded and potentially leaked to the entire internet. Yet they still do stupid things. And there's a reason why they do this too. See, the reality is that Twitch streaming is a super high pressure environment. Unlike YouTube, Twitch relies on your stream being live and in the moment. There's no editing involved. Every second counts. And if you waste it, viewers will move on to something more exciting. This means that streamers need to constantly keep things fresh and entertaining, which requires a lot of preparation and work. If you don't put in the effort, your channel will eventually die, and then you'll be just another channel that no one remembers. It's this constant struggle to stay relevant that pushes streamers to take risks and sometimes do questionable things. If it gets a rise out of the community, they'll do it. If it gets them more subscribers, they'll do it. Because in this business, your accomplishments don't mean anything if no one remembers them. And that's the reason why when we see streamers being made fun of, we feel like we're watching them get buried alive. In a sense, we're watching them slowly fade away into irrelevance. And to be honest, it's kind of sad. Streaming is one of the few jobs where you can make a decent living by just playing video games. But it's also one of the most cutthroat industries out there. You have to be willing to push the limits and sometimes do things that you wouldn't normally do. And if you make a mistake, well, it will be remembered. Twitch streamers are in the unique position of having to balance their own dignity with the need to stay relevant. And let's face it, most of us would probably crumble under that kind of pressure. And that's the reason why we should probably cut them some slack next time we see them do something cringy. Maybe they were just trying to stay afloat. Maybe they were just trying to keep their head above water. Of course, this doesn't excuse bad behavior or give streamers a free pass. But it does give us some perspective. It shows us why they might make questionable decisions and why they might push the limits just a bit too far. At the end of the day, we all do what we can to survive. Whether it's climbing the corporate ladder, paying rent on time, or just making friends, we all have to do what we can to get by. And for some people, that means doing things that might be a little bit cringy. It's easy to judge others when we're comfortable in our own routines and safe in our own lives. But when we understand the pressures and struggles that others face, we can be more compassionate and forgiving. Of course, that doesn't mean we have to put up with toxic behavior or accept harmful actions. But it does mean that we should try to understand the motivations behind why people do what they do. In a world where we're constantly striving to be the best versions of ourselves, it's easy to forget that everyone is fighting their own battles. Everyone is trying to get by the best way they know how. And maybe, just maybe, we should all be a little bit kinder to each other. Next time you see a streamer do something cringy, try to remember that they're just a person doing their best to navigate the world. Try to remember that they have hopes and dreams just like you. And maybe, just maybe, we can all learn a thing or two from them about how to be a little bit more brave, a little bit more honest, and a little bit more ourselves. This time, let's finally dive into the depths of gamer shame. Before we jump into it, I need to say this is a very slow unraveling of why embarrassment and shame lingers so deeply in gaming. And we can't really talk about this without talking about culture, both the culture of gaming and the cultures that birthed it. It's also pretty personal, so buckle up. If you don't know me outside of the context of this channel, then this might seem a little out of left field. But if you've ever watched my other content, you know that I'm interested in anthropology, specifically the study of shame. If you've seen my research project, you'll know that I spent 2 years doing fieldwork and learning about shame across many different cultures. Shame is universal, but how it's expressed and experienced varies wildly. Most of us don't even know we're carrying the baggage from our childhoods around shame. And with all of that being said, there are parts of this video that will be deeply personal to me, so please try to be kind. It is going to take a bit to get to gaming, so bear with me. In China, there's an interesting concept that directly relates to gaming culture, but it's called face. You may have heard of this before, but the literal translation of face is pretty interesting. It means to save one's face or to lose one's face. This has multiple meanings in various contexts, but the most relevant one here is the meaning within competitive play. To lose face is to die socially. When you lose face, you have broken some social rule or made a mistake that brings dishonor upon yourself and your family. There are multiple ways to lose face, but usually they all boil down to bringing some sort of disgrace to yourself or others. Whether it's losing a competition or acting out of line or bringing harm to those who are close to you. In some cases, losing face could mean that you have brought shame not only to yourself, but your entire community or country. I grew up hearing about face a lot when I was a kid. My dad is Chinese, and growing up in Canada, he always told me about the importance of saving face. And I remember it really resonating with me. A child should be seen and not heard, right? As kids, we already inherently understand that we're bringing shame to our parents sometimes. We make a lot of mistakes, we do stupid things. It comes with the territory. But the idea that if we were to actually cause real harm, like hurting someone or getting arrested or dropping out of school, that would be something that brings permanent and inescapable shame upon ourselves and our family. That really freaked me out as a kid. There's a famous saying in Chinese culture that goes something like this: when someone is alive, they want to have face. When someone is dead, they want to keep face. What this means is that when you're alive, you want to bring honor to yourself and your family. But even after you're dead, your family wants to keep up the appearance that you died with honor. Think about a funeral, for example. Funerals are often the most extravagant they've ever been for the most important person in the country. Even in a dictatorship, the leader will receive the most lavish and expensive funeral. Why? Because no matter what you think of that person as a human being, the job of the government is to uphold the image of that leader, They must be treated with respect. They must be honored. They must be celebrated. Losing face, therefore, isn't just a personal thing, it's a communal thing. It reflects poorly not only on yourself, but everyone who knows you. So therefore, by extension, you have an obligation not only to maintain your own honor, but the honor of your friends and your family. Now, I could go on at length about this topic, but this is supposed to be a gaming video, so let's talk about games. Let's get back to gaming. We've established that in many Asian cultures, including Chinese culture, the concept of losing face and dying socially is a very serious thing. But let's talk about how that relates to gaming. In gaming culture, especially in Western gaming culture, we often joke about losing face. I'm sure you've seen memes or videos about rage quitting and throwing your keyboard or monitor across the room. These are all outward expressions of losing face while playing a game. On a competitive level, these things happen all the time. People get mad. People break their equipment. Some of these moments even become iconic. Who doesn't remember the face and a drill fail? Moments like these are entertaining to watch because they're extreme versions of what we've all felt before, the feeling of complete and utter humiliation. We laugh at them because it feels good to know that we're not the only ones who experience this. But there's also another reason why we love to see other people fail. And I'll tell you right now that this is going to sound incredibly self-centered. Okay, here goes nothing. When we watch another person fail, we subconsciously remind ourselves that we're not that good either. We're not that much better than them. So we should probably chill on the whole rage quitting thing. Otherwise, we'll end up just like them. It's a very subtle psychological phenomenon, and it happens all the time. We need constant reminders that we're not that great so that we can stay humble. It's very difficult for any of us to get a realistic grasp on how good we truly are at anything. So watching other people fail is a good reminder for us to stay humble. It's a reminder that the skill we've put in does not make us untouchable. It keeps us locked in the present moment. It reminds us that we're still in the game. The problem happens when we internalize these feelings of shame. The difference between casual gamers and competitive gamers is that competitive gamers play with their identity on the line. Every time they step into a game, they have to prove themselves worthy. They have to prove that they belong. And when they fail to do so, they lose face. But the problem arises when we start to equate our identity with winning or losing. When we identify ourselves as winners, we start to treat anyone who is worse than us as inferior. We feel superior. We start to dehumanize them. When we identify ourselves as losers, we start to view ourselves as worthless. We start to belittle ourselves. When we start to feel deep shame over our losses, that's when we have a problem. So what exactly is the big deal about losing face? Well, the big deal is that if you lose face, you can't get it back. You can't erase your mistakes. You can't undo your failures. Once you've lost face, you've died socially. There's no coming back. It's a permanent state of being. If you've ever read Victor Wemby Mutombo's story, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. I talked about his story in my last video. He's one of the best NBA players right now, and he hasn't spoken a word since 2013. He stopped speaking after his brother, who was his best friend, passed away. By cutting himself off from the world, he cut himself off from the source of shame, from the judgments of other people. He became socially dead. He chose to die socially rather than live with the pain of interacting with other human beings. We don't have to be as extreme as Victor Wembanyama, though. All of us have probably suffered from the effects of losing face. How many of you have ever quit a game and just started playing solo queue instead of ranked? I know I've done that a ton. Why? Because the possibility of losing face in ranked is too high. Solo queue has no stakes, it's risk-free. You can never lose face because you were never trying to win in the first place. You were just trying to play for fun. Think about it like this. If you play a ranked game and you lose, you feel ashamed. You feel like you have lost something important. But if you play a normal game and you lose, it doesn't feel like you've lost anything. Why is that? Because you were never playing to win in the first place. Losing face is inevitable in competitive gaming. No matter how good you are, you're gonna lose. It's statistically impossible to win every single game. The odds are always against you. As long as you're putting your identity on the line, you will inevitably lose face. And once you've lost face, you will never be able to get it back. But there's another perspective on this. We all have the same opportunity to lose face. It doesn't matter what race you are, what religion you are, where you come from. Everyone is equal in this regard. Maybe that's why gamers who compete find it so satisfying. They get to test themselves. They get to prove themselves. They get to test their mettle against the rest of the pack. Losing face is inevitable, but the chance to even compete for face is a privilege that not everyone gets. In today's age, we're constantly looking for ways to quantify our potential. We want to know what our true skill is. We want to know what our rank is. We want to compare ourselves to other people, so we play games. We climb the leaderboard. We flex our MMR. We post our clips online. It's all a way for us to prove ourselves. It's all a way for us to save face. It's funny how we've gone full circle and come back to this point. Technology has given us the perfect environment to endlessly test ourselves. And yet, the more we test ourselves, the more we realize how meaningless all of this is. It's like Sisyphus pushing his rock up the hill. No matter how hard he pushes, the rock will always roll back down. No matter how much we improve ourselves, no matter how much we climb the ladder, it doesn't matter. We're always going to lose face again, so why bother playing the game in the first place? Why even care about losing face? Well, maybe it's because the process of trying, of competing, of pushing ourselves to be better is the only thing that matters. Maybe it's the journey that matters and not the destination. To put it bluntly, we humans are pretty bad at dealing with failure and screwing up. It happens to all of us. And as such, some people will try to hide or minimize their mistakes from others out of fear of looking foolish or weak. For most people, this behavior is a quick passing feeling. A little white lie here, a fib there to save face. We've all done it, and we've probably all been called out for it too. But for some people, this internal dialogue becomes much more permanent. Their mind keeps replaying the moment they screwed up on repeat, causing them to feel utterly humiliated. That moment that they tried to bury deep down inside of them comes bubbling back up, not allowing them to sleep or think clearly. They feel alone, worthless, and desperately want to forget it ever happened. What if I told you that the reason you have such a hard time moving past this moment is because of thousands of years of cultural conditioning? Today, we'll be taking a look at where this crippling shame comes from and how it affects modern gamers in surprising ways. Let's get into it. It's important to first discuss the nature of shame and how it manifests in modern society. First, shame differs from embarrassment in that it's a much more intense, long-lasting, and self-perpetuating emotion. While you can feel embarrassed about something small that you did, like tripping while walking into a party, shame is more closely related to feelings of worthlessness and moral corruption. If you were to compare it to a physical injury, embarrassment is like a paper cut. It sucks when it happens, but heals pretty quickly. Shame is more like getting stabbed in the gut. It hurts like hell, and if left untreated, can fester and lead to infection. Shame also leads to very unhealthy behaviors like social withdrawal, anxiety, and depression. In extreme cases, people may even hurt themselves to try and alleviate these feelings. Fortunately, this is relatively rare, and most people will never have to deal with this sort of psychological torment. But what causes those unfortunate enough to have it? Well, hold on to your butts because it goes deeper than you might expect. To understand why some people experience shame so intensely, we need to take a brief detour through history and look at medieval feudal Japan. The Japanese culture has historically placed great emphasis on honor, both personal and societal. And there was no greater dishonor than bringing shame upon one's family. This sense of duty led many Japanese men to live their entire lives without experiencing any kind of intimate relationship outside of marriage, fearing that it would somehow taint their honor. It also led to the birth of a rather unique tradition. You see, during the Edo period, if a samurai felt as though they had brought shame upon themselves or their family, they were expected to commit suicide by disembowelment. This practice didn't apply to just serious offenses either. Sometimes it could be as trivial as losing a sword duel against another samurai. And believe me when I say that they took this practice seriously. Every samurai carried a dagger specifically designed for seppuku, which is what the Japanese call disembowelment. These daggers were always kept well sharpened and ready to use. If a samurai was ordered to commit seppuku, they would accept their punishment without hesitation. There were even special events held across the country where condemned criminals would be given the chance to perform seppuku instead of being publicly executed. Seppuku wasn't just reserved for men either. Women were expected to perform the same act if they had committed adultery or brought shame upon their family in other ways. Now, before you start typing out comments calling the Japanese people crazy, keep in mind that they're far from the only ones who have exhibited this behavior. From ancient Rome to Renaissance Italy, suicidal ideation due to shame has been a common occurrence throughout human history. And the way they dealt with it differed from culture to culture, but the underlying reasons remain the same. They wanted to be seen as honorable members of society. They feared appearing weak, incompetent, or corrupt. They couldn't bear the thought of letting down their family or community. So let's take a moment to really unpack that. What is it about being seen as weak, incompetent, or corrupt that causes so much shame? To answer that question, we need to look no further than our own childhood. Think back to when you were young and going to school. What was the one thing that every kid dreaded more than anything else? Getting made fun of. There is an evolutionary reason behind this. Young children are extremely sensitive to changes in their social environment. If they're excluded from a group or punished by their peers, it directly impacts their ability to thrive and survive. This is why kids will often cry or become withdrawn when they're not invited to a party or made to sit out during a game. It's not just because they want to be included. It's because their brain is telling them that they're being rejected and survival is at risk. As we grow older, we learn that recess isn't the most important part of the school day, and that not getting invited to a birthday party doesn't mean that you're worthless, but unfortunately, the damage is already done. Many of us still crave acceptance and belonging among our peers, and being rejected causes us to experience a sense of shame that can be difficult to move past. But that begs the question, what does this have to do with gaming? Well, video games are simply an extension of this innate desire to be accepted. By playing video games, we have the chance to prove ourselves. We can gain recognition among our peers and climb to the top of a leaderboard, but with great reward comes great risk. As any seasoned gamer can tell you, climbing to the top is a long and arduous journey filled with defeat and failure. And the higher you climb, the more the pressure to succeed becomes. Each loss knocks you further down the rankings and makes you look worse to others. For some people, this level of scrutiny causes them to feel overwhelmed and anxious. They play poorly and lose even more. Before they know it, they find themselves stuck in a cycle of defeat and humiliation. To make things worse, some games actively encourage you to compete against each other. If the game developers have made it clear that you should view your fellow players as competition, then it's only natural to assume that they're looking at you the same way. After all, if the goal is to win and only one person can be the winner, then you must be competing against each other. Even in games that don't actively pit you against each other, you still have your skill issue. Some players will inevitably be better than you, and that can cause you to feel embarrassed for not being able to perform at their level. Next, we'll take a look at some games that have taken things to the next level when it comes to shaming their players. One thing that many people don't realize is that this isn't just a problem that affects low-skilled players. Even professional esports athletes have been known to suffer from shame after a particularly embarrassing loss. Some handle it better than others, but in the end, it's just a normal part of the job. There are two main takeaways. The first is that many of our greatest fears and deepest insecurities are the result of thousands of years of evolution and conditioning. We didn't choose to be this way, and neither did any other species on this planet. The second takeaway is that although everyone experiences shame from time to time, that doesn't mean that you have to let it control you. Don't let the fleeting opinions of others dictate your self-worth. If you're struggling with feelings of shame, embarrassment, isolation, depression, or anxiety, then please reach out to BetterHelp today and take the first step towards a healthier tomorrow. In a culture where people will happily put hundreds of hours into a game but won't sit through an hour-long cutscene, you would think we'd be able to just skip past the unfun parts. Yet there is one thing that no one can skip in gaming: the feeling of shame. It's something that we are all familiar with. That feeling of having done something wrong, of being unworthy or somehow not living up to some standard. But what is it about gaming that makes it so difficult to escape the feeling of shame? Clans were a big deal. They provided a sense of community and belonging, which is something that is important to everyone, especially teenagers. The core aspect of clans was exclusivity. Just as a medieval guild would have required its members to live up to a certain standard in order to remain a member, gaming clans had requirements too. But these trolls weren't the first. Let's go back in time to an era where the stakes were higher and the duels were real. Sometimes it was about skill, sometimes it was about the amount of time that you had available. The ideal of the Southern gentleman became firmly established, emphasizing traits such as courage, honor, and respect for women. It was considered a way to resolve conflicts of honor and demonstrate one as commitment to upholding their code of conduct. But even in the modern day, the legacy of dueling lives on in many forms, particularly in literature and film. Well, you see, the emphasis on honor and the prevalence of dueling in Southern culture had a profound impact on the development of the region's identity. The code of honor became deeply ingrained in the social norms of the South, influencing everything from interpersonal relationships to political discourse. But let's be honest, it's really just a matter of time before someone takes things too far again. Because when the internet goes dark, it can go very dark indeed. Even today, the South is known for its strong sense of pride and tradition. The next part of our story takes us back to the early days of gaming, to a time when the industry was still in its infancy. This was a time when the gaming industry was still finding its footing. Developers were experimenting with new genres and gameplay mechanics, and gamers were eager to try anything. And the legacy of honor and dueling played a significant role in shaping that reputation. In the late 1980s, the gaming industry was rocked by a scandal that would come to be known as the massacre at Columbine High School. In 1999, 2 students opened fire at their high school, killing 12 students and 1 teacher before taking their own lives. Critics argued that games were becoming increasingly violent and that they were having a negative impact on young people. Not only did the ESRB end up stifling creativity and diversity in video games, but it also created a divide between gamers and non-gamers that is still present today. And if you didn't, well, You can always leave a dislike and tell me why in the comments below. But it is clear that the desire to defend one's honor is still alive and well in the gaming community. Similarly, the controversies surrounding violent video games may seem like ancient history, but that had a lasting impact on the gaming industry and continue to shape the way that games are made and played today. Games like Doom and Quake were seen as particularly controversial because they allowed players to engage in graphic violence in a virtual world. One of the most controversial games of the era was Death Race, a game based on the film of the same name. The fear of government regulation and censorship has led to developers being more cautious about the content of their games. What began as a small-scale movement by concerned parents soon became a full-blown campaign by politicians and media, outlets looking to capitalize on the fear surrounding video games, which has in turn led to a proliferation of watered-down versions of games that are released in different regions around the world. It allowed players to take control of a car and run over pedestrians and police officers. The game was seen as a glorification of violence, and it was banned in several states. But along with the excitement and fun that video games brought to people's lives, there was also a growing concern about their impact on society. Video games were being blamed for everything from childhood obesity to the decline of traditional values. Stories of men who defend their honor with their fists or their weapons are still popular today. This was the beginning of a long and contentious debate that continues to this day. People were losing their jobs and the economy was in sharp decline. And in the midst of this economic uncertainty, video games were seen as a luxury that people couldn't afford. The gaming industry was hit hard and sales plummeted. Of course, not everyone was a fan of this violent tradition. Many people, including women's rights activists and religious leaders, criticized the practice of dueling, seeing it as unnecessary and barbaric. But despite the criticism, the tradition of dueling persisted. While the concept of honor may have positive connotations, in reality, it often led to violence. At its worst, the code of honor demanded that people settle disputes through violence, leading to a proliferation of duels. And sometimes it was about how much money you had to spend on the latest and greatest hardware. And how does the history of gaming tie into this? Welcome to another episode of Lore. To slag someone off is a British expression that means to criticize them heavily. But it also opened the floodgates for a new kind of trash talk, flaming. And anyone who gets in the way of that can expect to be viciously attacked. When you think about it, it really isn't that far removed from the days of dueling. Both then and now, it is about defending one's honor. Flaming is basically taking an already heated argument and adding fuel to the fire. It's aggressive name-calling and insults with the intent to provoke a reaction. Unlike lagging, which was more lighthearted, flaming is a malicious attempt to upset and anger the other player. In the early days of the internet, it was a common practice among online gamers to insult and belittle one another. Slagging was considered a form of entertainment and a way to pass the time while waiting for a game to start. It was also seen as a way to build camaraderie among clan members by creating a common enemy to mock together. Today, we're taking a look at the shameful history of gamer shame, how it started and why it's still relevant today. Before we get into it, I want to say something. Since ancient Greek times, the concept of kleos, which combined fame and glory, had been highly valued. Kleos was achieved by doing great deeds in battle, upholding one's values and protecting one's homeland. As the Roman Empire rose to power, the concept of honor became more codified. Romans believed that individuals should always strive to uphold their public image and maintain a reputation for excellence. This emphasis on honor continued throughout the Middle Ages and eventually found its way into the southern United States, where it took on a unique character, that of the Southern gentleman. This is gonna be a long series, and this is only part 5. So if you find yourself enjoying it, please make sure to like this video and subscribe, because that helps me keep making more of these videos. If you don't like the video, you can also dislike it and tell me why in the comments below. Now back to the video. There are two things that are synonymous with gaming, competition, and nerdiness. Gaming has always been inherently competitive from the moment that it became a hobby. We were racking up high scores and comparing them with our friends. And it's precisely this competitiveness that leads to the first type of shame. In the early days of PC gaming, when the internet was still a novelty and dial-up was the norm, the way that most people connected with others who shared their passion for games was through bulletin board systems or BBSS. These were sort of like forums where people could discuss games, post high scores, and chat with each other. Some BBSS specialized in particular games and some catered to a broader audience. But they were important because they provided a sense of community for gamers before the advent of the World Wide Web. This was the setting for the birth of an online community that would become a staple of modern gaming, a clan. Clans offered a sense of camaraderie and belonging. In a time before voice chat was widespread, written communication was the main way to interact with your fellow gamers. This desire for exclusivity led to something that was pretty common at the time, slagging. The rise of the internet and chat rooms brought even more opportunities for gamers to connect with one another. These days, both flamers and slaggers are known as trolls, and trolling has become such a big problem in gaming that there are now entire communities dedicated to finding and exposing trolls. For centuries, Western civilization had been steeped in a culture of honor. A duel was a formal and regulated contest between two people, usually involving weapons such as swords or pistols. In fact, it wasn't until the 20th century that dueling began to fall out of favor, largely due to the influence of the United States, which discouraged such practices. But how does this affect us? Why does any of this matter? The difference nowadays is that instead of pistols at dawn, it's angry comments on Reddit threads. In the 1970s and 80s, video games were mostly played in arcades or at home on consoles like the Atari 2600. One of the most iconic games of this era was Space Invaders, a simple but addictive shoot 'em up game that quickly became a hit. In the early 1980s, the US began to experience a recession that lasted for several years. This backlash against violent video games led to the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, which developed a rating system to help parents make informed decisions about what games their children could play. But the controversy surrounding video games didn't end there. Many people blamed the shooters' fascination with violent video games, claiming that they had desensitized the students to violence and made them more likely to engage in it themselves. While the debate over the effects of violent video games continues to this day, it's clear that the controversy surrounding them has had a lasting impact on the gaming industry. And so we find ourselves in the position that we're in today, where gamers are constantly having to fight for their right to play the games that they want to play without interference from outside forces. There is an old joke about Monopoly that goes something like this. One day, a husband and wife are playing Monopoly with their kids, and the wife lands on Boardwalk, and the husband says, "Oh, you're gonna get Monopoly jail tonight." And she says, "No, we agreed not to talk about it while the children are here." The dark truth is that one of the many reasons we play games at all is to experience that sweet, sweet dopamine rush of revenge. But what does it say about us that we've constructed this elaborate fantasy world where we can live out our darkest desires? Well, I don't know. But if you stick around long enough, you might just find out. Welcome back to Gamer Shame. It's me. And before we continue this painfully slow unraveling of why embarrassment and shame linger so deeply in gaming and how history prepared us for this strange emotional legacy, let's start off with the origins of these things we play. Before there was the internet or consoles or even tabletop RPGs, there were board games. And if you've ever played a board game, They're really just a Pandora's box of fury waiting to be unleashed at any moment. If you're thinking, whoa, 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 then let me just ask you to consider your own experiences. How many times have you been playing a simple children's game like Candyland, and suddenly one of your friends accuses you of cheating, or worse, they land on Go and demand you pay them the $200 you owe them, even though nothing in the rules says you're supposed to do that. And every time you refuse, they yell, "But I won't have to work hard for my money." And then you say, "Okay, fine, but now I'm never gonna talk to you again." And then they say, "Deal." Okay, perhaps my example was a bit extreme, but chances are you've experienced some variation of this behavior. After all, board games are basically just real life. You have valuable resources like money and properties, relationships with other players, and the crushing knowledge that no matter what you do, someone else will always win. It's because of this last part that Monopoly has earned its reputation as a particularly vicious game. There's only one winner and everyone else is left holding the bag full of play money. Because of this, Monopoly has taken countless lives. Okay, maybe not countless, but there are at least 3 recorded cases of people murdering each other after playing Monopoly. So if you think your uncle throwing a glass of beer on the table after losing a few games is bad, it could always be worse. At least he didn't pull out a tire iron. Okay, cool. But what does this have to do with gamer shame? Well, according to Dr. Justin Cowson, clinical psychologist and author of The Game of Life, the reason board games can turn violent so quickly is that we project our feelings of competition and sometimes even prejudice onto the game itself. For instance, we've already established that we play games partially to vicariously enact our revenge fantasies, but we also pour all of our hopes and dreams into being the best. Maybe we love board games because they remind us of when we were young and our parents would gather around the table and congratulate us for winning. Or maybe we just want to feel that sweet, sweet feeling of validation again. Either way, the problem arises when we lose. As Carlson puts it, it's not the game that provokes anger. It's the fact that we associate our own sense of self-esteem with winning. We start taking losses personally, and suddenly we're yelling at the top of our lungs because someone landed on our only property. And yeah, it's stupid and childish and ultimately unproductive, but at least we can all agree that this is pretty much universal human nature. But it wasn't until I started playing video games that I realized there was another layer to this. See, when I was a kid, I grew up on a steady diet of multiplayer Halo and Call of Duty. Now I know what you're thinking. Wow, what a shocker. Someone spent most of their childhood playing first-person shooters. No wonder they turned out to be such a wonderful person. But seriously, it was during those formative years that I learned something disturbing about myself, namely that I am a filthy casual. Now, before you click away, hear me out because this is important. Back when I was a Halo fanatic, there was no Xbox Live or Steam Workshop or even Twitch for that matter. The internet at that time was a pretty barren wasteland. So whenever I wanted to play multiplayer, I had to go over to a friend's house or convince my cousin to stop playing RuneScape long enough to team up with me. And I don't know about you, but I've always found it difficult to befriend people when I'm brandishing a controller like a weapon. Nowadays, the internet has made gaming more accessible than ever before. A single console can connect you to millions of players from across the world. And while that is great for the obvious reasons, it also means that you can no longer hide from your mistakes. In today's hyper-competitive climate, if you suck, someone will be sure to tell you and, more importantly, record it and upload it to YouTube. And believe me when I say that since the early days of Halo, things have gotten way worse. Today, thousands of videos are uploaded every single day of clueless noobs getting flamed by their teammates. But why are they doing it? What's driving this urge to publicly humiliate strangers? Well, according to Dr. Patrick M. Hill, professor of communication studies at Lincoln University, It all comes down to what he calls passive-aggressive relational aggression. Simply put, it's a way for people to attack others without directly confronting them. Let me explain. Remember when you were in grade school and someone wrote a really bad joke about you on the bathroom wall? Or maybe you were in high school and someone passed around a really unflattering picture of you. If you've ever experienced anything like that, you know how painful it can be. But you probably also remember another emotion you felt, namely the desire for revenge. You wanted to strike back, but you didn't want to do it face to face. Instead, you scribbled your response on the wall, or maybe you passed the photo around yourself. Why? Well, according to Hill, it's because we feel safest when we attack people indirectly. We feel no personal risk and we can avoid confrontation. And while most of us grow out of writing nasty jokes in the bathroom, that same mentality follows us into adulthood. That's why so many people take to online gaming as a new form of warfare. They can attack and criticize others without fear of physical reprisal. And since the ultimate goal is to destroy their opponents anyway, a little name-calling seems like harmless fun. At least that's what people tell themselves, but there's more to the story. According to Dr. Andrew Elliott, professor of social psychology at New York University, there's a psychological principle at play here called the spotlight effect. This is the idea that we think everyone is watching us all the time, even though that's obviously not true. Think about it. When you post something online, whether it's a funny meme or a picture of your dinner, you're essentially putting yourself out there for public consumption. And if people leave mean comments, it can make you feel exposed and vulnerable. So what do? You block them, you delete the post, and you swear never to put yourself out there again. But then you remember that you love the attention and you decide to do it again. And when that happens, you realize that you're kind of screwed because now you have to deal with people criticizing you for no apparent reason. According to Elliot, the only way to overcome the spotlight effect is to remember that other people are dealing with the same thing. But even if you keep that in mind, there's still the issue of making yourself vulnerable to begin with. Why do you feel the need to show people what you're doing or what you think? Well, that's a question for you to answer, but it's probably a good place to start if you're tired of people constantly criticizing you. Then there's the issue of how other people behave when you leave them alone. See, the anonymity of the internet has given birth to a whole new generation of trolls who delight in spreading chaos. And the worst part is that there doesn't seem to be any way to stop them. I mean, just look at what happened to the developers of the 2018 God of War game. After they added a post-game update, fans noticed that there was a female character in the credits who apparently didn't exist in the actual game. Now, I don't know about you, but if I were a game developer and I saw a bunch of angry fans accusing me of shoehorning a female character into my game, I would feel pretty disheartened. But here's what really happened. That female character actually did exist. Her name was Monica, and she was the animator who worked tirelessly on the game for months. When the fans got wind of this, they felt ashamed for attacking her, and the developers apologized profusely. But that's not where the story ends. Turns out Monica took the hate so hard, she quit her job at Sony and deleted all her social media accounts. Now, obviously, the internet immediately felt horrible, but that didn't undo the damage they'd done. And it's a cautionary tale that reminds us all that even though the internet can bring us closer together, it can also drive a wedge between us and those we care about most. And that's why we should all try to be a little kinder to each other, especially when we're playing games. We discussed the complicated relationships between social anxiety, online disinhibition, and desensitization. We also dove into the idea that online interactions are more meaningful than you might think, because even though we might be hiding behind usernames, every virtual interaction still stimulates reward centers in our brain. And if someone does something that makes you feel uncomfortable or upset, it's not your fault for overreacting. It's completely natural to want to confront these people and hold them accountable. but this can come with a lot of baggage. As a society, we were taught from a very young age to avoid confrontation at all costs. And this has bled into the way we interact online. So when you do try to defend yourself, you might be met with some unexpected responses like gaslighting and deflecting. Today, we're going to slowly and carefully unravel why embarrassment and shame lingers so deeply in gaming, and how history prepared us for this unwanted emotional legacy. But before we get started, it would help me out a lot if you like this video and subscribe to the channel. This is completely optional, but if you'd like to see a brand new original series in the future, then it would mean the world to me if you did subscribe. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's begin. For today's story, we're going to be taking a trip back to the early days of the Xbox 360, one of the most popular consoles of all time. It was released in 2005, bringing next-gen graphics and online functionality to the fingertips of millions. Back then, Microsoft had just introduced their Xbox Live service, a groundbreaking concept that allowed gamers to connect with friends and play multiplayer games online. One of the most exciting features of Xbox Live was the voice chat functionality. Players could communicate with each other through an Xbox Live headset, adding a new level of immersion and interactivity to online gaming. However, as you might have guessed, what followed was a rapid descent into the depths of digital depravity. You see, humans have a rich history of publicly shaming others, usually to enforce social norms and maintain group cohesion. In the past, this might have taken the form of ostracizing someone from a community or publicly denouncing them within a close-knit group. But with the advent of technology, especially the internet and social media, the nature of public shaming has evolved. For example, there was the rise of the "you're getting ganked, call out" phenomenon that occurred on the Xbox 360 during the late 2000s and early 2010s. This was a period when Xbox Live had just become popular and online gaming was becoming increasingly mainstream. As more and more players joined multiplayer games, the need for communication and coordination became more apparent. Voice chat was a convenient and effective way for teammates to strategize, issue commands, and coordinate attacks. However, as with any online platform, there will always be a subset of users who abuse the system for their own amusement. Some players began using voice chat to bully, harass, and humiliate their opponents, or even their own teammates. One common tactic was to repeatedly yell, "You're getting ganked," into the microphone whenever a player was about to be attacked by multiple opponents, or "You're getting owned" when a player was defeated. The intent was obviously to humiliate and demoralize the victim. These taunts were often accompanied by derogatory language, racial slurs, and personal insults, making the experience even more distressing for those on the receiving end. It wasn't just limited to one game or one type of player. It happened across various games and to players of all skill levels. The anonymity provided by online gaming allowed these toxic players to act with impunity, knowing that their victims couldn't easily identify or confront them. This created a cycle of fear and self-censorship where victims were too afraid to speak up or retaliate, which emboldened the bullies even further. But why did this happen? Why did these players engage in such harmful behavior? One contributing factor was the perceived lack of consequences. Many of these players likely felt that their actions wouldn't result in any repercussions, either because they didn't believe that Microsoft would take action against them, or that their victims would simply ignore or forget about the harassment. Additionally, the sense of anonymity provided by online gaming allowed these players to act without fear of being identified or held accountable. Furthermore, the competitive nature of online gaming can sometimes foster an environment of hostility and aggression. As players strive to win, they may become more reactive and less inhibited in their online interactions. This is backed by research showing that competition can trigger heightened emotions, leading to increased aggression. Thankfully, there have been efforts to combat this toxic behavior. Online platforms like Xbox Live have implemented community guidelines, reporting systems, and even bans to address the issue of harassment and hate speech. Moreover, promoting positive and inclusive gaming communities can help create an environment where such behavior is discouraged and victims feel supported. Ultimately, the problem of toxic callouts in online gaming reflects a larger societal issue of online harassment and the importance of fostering empathy, respect, and accountability in digital spaces. So now you're probably thinking this sounds like a nightmare scenario, and thank God I never experienced anything like this. Well, I have some good news for you. A recent study published in the journal Computers and Human Behavior found that the vast majority of gamers, especially younger gamers, don't actually experience much toxicity at all. In fact, the study states that a majority of gamers, especially younger gamers, report mostly positive and friendly experiences with their online peers. So why is it then that when you do hear stories about toxic gamers, they always seem to stick in your memory? Well, it turns out that negative experiences like bullying, griefing, or other forms of toxicity tend to leave a stronger impression on us due to a phenomenon known as the negativity bias. Our brains are wired to pay more attention to negative information like threats or dangers because they were critical for survival in our evolutionary past. This means that even if most of our online interactions are positive, the few negative ones can stand out and overshadow our overall experience. Additionally, the availability heuristic causes us to overestimate the likelihood of negative events occurring based on how easily we can recall them. For example, if you've recently watched a video or read an article about toxic gaming behavior, it might make you more sensitive to such issues and lead you to interpret recent experiences through that lens. Furthermore, confirmation bias can reinforce our beliefs about the prevalence of toxicity. If you already believe that gaming is full of toxic players, you're more likely to seek out and interpret ambiguous situations as evidence of that belief. It's important to recognize that while toxicity exists in gaming, it doesn't represent the entirety of the online gaming community. The vast majority of gamers are not toxic, and the negative experiences we hear about are often the exceptions rather than the rule. Embracing positivity and promoting empathy and respect can help create a better gaming community for everyone. I want to encourage you to embrace positivity, empathy, and respect in your online interactions. Toxicity may exist in gaming, but it doesn't define the entire community. Let's work together to make gaming a more inclusive and enjoyable experience for everyone. You ever wonder why we are all so embarrassed about playing games? Why is it that even in a room full of people who love games as much as you do, you can't help but feel a deep sense of shame when it comes time to talk about them? And why does that shame only intensify when your friends or viewers start watching you play? Let's face it, we've all been made fun of for the games we like at some point or another, but that doesn't really explain this feeling. After all, if someone makes fun of the game you're playing, you just tell them to kick rocks. It's not their fault you suck at the game, it's yours. So what's the deal? Well, before we get into that, let me ask you another question. When was the last time you played a game without any intention of showing anyone? Chances are it hasn't happened, at least not since you were a kid. And that right, there is why we can't talk about games honestly. We've all been so hyper-watched our entire lives that even the most innocent and mundane things can make us feel exposed and vulnerable. But that's only part of the story. The other half lies dormant within us until we actually show our face playing games. Which brings us to today's topic, speedrunning fails on stream. Most people will never know this about me, but back in 2019, I used to stream pretty regularly. Now, there were only a handful of people who ever actually tuned in, and those numbers only went up when I did something stupid enough to be featured on Twitch plays, which I think happened maybe 3 times. These days, though, streaming is more popular than ever. And with the rise of Twitch rivals, many streamers have had the opportunity to go pro. On top of that, streaming has also given way to a whole new generation of shy yet eager gamers who want to share their passion, but they're too afraid to show themselves playing games. Even in 2023, it's hard enough to put yourself out there and allow other people to watch you play. You'd think we would have gotten over that by now. But while many of us may be desensitized to showing off our skills, one thing still remains painfully embarrassing, and that is dying. Now, I know this sounds dumb, but consider this for a second. If you've ever joined a random online match in any game and you weren't carrying, then you've definitely seen this type of behavior before. Some teammates who don't care about winning, others who try too hard, and then there are the ones who are just straight up bad. A lot of times I find myself yelling at my screen whenever I see this kind of behavior because I know it as hopeless. They're never gonna improve. But if I'm watching someone else stream and they die a few times in a row, I can't help but cringe. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You know you shouldn't look, but you can't look away. That's what makes speedrunning fails streams so fascinating. It's like train wreck material, but it's also like peeking through a window into someone else's soul. I know that might sound a bit dramatic, but if you think about it, every single streamer in the world was once an innocent gamer sitting in front of their PC, completely unaware of the trauma they were about to endure. For many, it starts off as a mild inconvenience, just people making fun of their favorite games or character. But as they continue to put themselves out there, the intensity only grows. Before long, they're being judged by hundreds of thousands of people. And I don't envy that position for a second. Even though the community is mostly comprised of fellow gamers, we're also dealing with the same crowd that destroyed the souls of people like Chris Chan and Etika. How can we expect aspiring streamers to handle that kind of responsibility when people like that can't even handle watching a low-level player trying to tackle a speedrun? Back in March of 2022, a teenager named Aiden Winter was hit with a lifetime ban from Twitch for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Well, okay, that's not true. He was banned for the heinous crime of playing Pokemon Scarlet, which apparently upset some people. This led to hundreds of thousands of his viewers swamping the platform with angry messages demanding he be unbanned. Twitch ended up caving in and giving him a second chance, but the damage was already done. Sadly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every day, there are people getting banned for playing games that are old news. I think what bothers me the most is that most of these people have zero malicious intent. They're just sharing their passion with the world. And with the exception of certain high-profile streamers, very few people are going to intentionally set out to offend anyone. The truth is, we've been trained to feel guilty for enjoying ourselves. If you've ever spent hours upon hours playing a game, only to have your mother come in and yell at you for wasting your life, then you know exactly what I mean. Many of us grew up in households where we were never allowed to have any fun. Our parents always wanted us to be doing something more productive. I remember coming home from school one day with a PS2 in hand just to have my mom rip it apart and throw the pieces away. She even tried to throw the monitor out the window. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. All I could think about was how she would react if she saw me playing on my computer. I didn't even own a pair of headphones, so I was always too scared to turn my volume up. I didn't want her to hear what I was doing. And this continued all the way up until I moved out at age 18. Even then, I was too ashamed to admit I enjoyed playing games. I went to college to become a programmer because I thought it would make my parents proud. It was until after I graduated that I finally started living my life and doing the things I've always wanted to do. But by then, the damage was done. I had wasted years of my life hiding in the shadows, and now I'll never get that time back. That's probably why so many of us are obsessed with hiding our identity. You see, for most of human history, we used to live according to a social structure known as sacred honor. In order to maintain your reputation and protect your family's dignity, you had to act honorable at all times. You couldn't speak out of turn or you'd bring shame to your house. You couldn't be poor or you'd bring disgrace to your bloodline. And you certainly couldn't be caught dead playing children's games. Nowadays, however, we live in an era where everyone can become famous overnight. So all you need to do is say or do anything stupid once and it'll be forever cemented onto the internet. And unlike the past where you could always redeem yourself, these days you're forever labeled as a tryhard, a nerd, a geek, or whatever else. It's safe to say that we've all experienced some sort of humiliation in our lives. For some, it's worse than others. But regardless of your situation, it's important to remember that everyone is different and everyone copes with things differently. Some people take it like a champ, while others can't even look at the person who offended them. There's no right or wrong way to react. As long as you can move forward and keep pushing, that's all that matters. And while it's important to adapt to society's expectations, it's also important to stay true to who you are. Don't let anyone tell you that your feelings aren't valid. At the end of the day, we're all terminally online, and that's okay. As long as we can keep having fun and enjoying ourselves, that's all that matters. You ever wonder why you get embarrassed or ashamed when you suck at a game? How about when your parents walk in on you playing a video game? Why does that make you feel so bad? And if it doesn't, why is it such a common trope in movies and TV shows? Well, we're going to take a look at why gamers feel shame and why it hits them harder than other people. Video games are one of the most powerful mediums in existence. We've said that before, and we will say it again. Games can evoke an incredible range of emotions, from excitement to fear to joy. But among the most powerful of these are those emotions that fall under the umbrella of shame. Embarrassment, humiliation, awkwardness, anxiety, all of these can be elicited by games both good and bad. And though there are plenty of reasons why games can trigger these feelings in players, we believe there's something more going on here. Something that goes deeper than just feeling embarrassed because your character got naked in front of the entire school. So put on your big boy pants and let's get ready to talk about it. But first, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It helps out tremendously. And while you do that, here's a fun fact. Did you know that as recently as the 1980s, being a nerd was often seen as a sign of social awkwardness and was sometimes even used as an insult? Being labeled a nerd was not always synonymous with being cool and popular like it is now. In fact, it carried quite the opposite connotation back then. This is interesting to us because nerds and geeks were historically outsiders, people who felt different from their peers and perhaps didn't fit in with the popular crowd. They often found solace and acceptance in things like comics, fantasy novels, and science fiction, which could be seen as nerdy pursuits back in the day. Video games also began to rise in popularity around this time, becoming a hobby enjoyed by many, but still primarily associated with a niche group of enthusiasts. This association with a niche group may have contributed to the feeling of being different and set the stage for games to become a source of embarrassment or shame for some. As games started to gain mainstream popularity, the perception of what was considered nerdy or geeky also began to shift. What was once seen as odd or out of the ordinary became increasingly accepted and even celebrated, leading to a new wave of individuals embracing these labels as a badge of honor rather than a cause for shame. Nowadays, being a nerd or geek is often seen as a positive thing, connoting intelligence, passion, and a love for learning. It's important to recognize how societal perceptions and attitudes towards nerds, geeks, and gaming have evolved over time. Understanding this evolution allows us to appreciate how far we've come in terms of inclusivity and acceptance, but also serves as a reminder to continue challenging stereotypes and fostering a welcoming, environment for everyone regardless of their interests or hobbies. Now let's get back to the video. As we see it, there are two major reasons why gamers feel shame and why it hits them harder than other people. First, we need to talk about how games exploit what we call sacred honor, and second, we need to look at the actual neuroscience behind how embarrassment works. Let's start with sacred honor because it's important to understand how we got here. To better understand how games can trigger feelings of shame through the concept of sacred honor, let's take a brief journey back in time to feudal Japan. During this period, samurai warriors were held to a strict code of conduct known as Busaido, which emphasized loyalty, courage, and self-discipline. But above all else, it demanded unwavering honor. For a samurai, their honor was everything. It was the foundation of their reputation and the trust they had built with their peers. To lose honor was unthinkable and could bring shame not only upon themselves, but also their family and clan. Now let's fast forward to the world of video games. Over the centuries, the concept of honor has evolved, but our innate desire to be respected and valued by our peers remains the same. This is where games begin to capitalize on the idea of sacred honor. Many games, especially multiplayer competitive ones, inherently have a ranking system. Players are pitted against each other, and their skills and achievements are quantified through metrics such as kill counts, win ratios, and in-game currency. This creates a direct correlation between performance and honor, mirroring the samurai's pursuit of upholding their own honor. However, unlike the structured society of feudal Japan, the virtual environments of video games lack the same boundaries. The pursuit of honor within games can easily turn into an obsession, pushing players to extreme measures to maintain or improve their standing. Some might resort to cheating, exploiting glitches, or even engaging in toxic behavior to gain an advantage. These actions, while effective in climbing the ranks, often come at the cost of a player's integrity and self-respect. When players are caught engaging in such behavior, they are often met with consequences ranging from account suspensions to being banned from the community entirely. This public humiliation can be devastating, stripping them of their in-game honor and causing real-world embarrassment. This is the crux of how games weaponize sacred honor. By tapping into our primal desire for recognition and respect, games offer a quantifiable and highly visible platform for players to showcase their abilities. Yet the lack of boundaries and the potential for extreme competition can lead to toxic behavior and public humiliation when caught. As with any powerful tool, it's up to the individual to wield it responsibly. Now, let's move on to the second reason why gamers feel shame neuroscience. To fully comprehend why gamers experience shame differently, we must delve into the intricate workings of the human brain and explore the neural pathways that govern our emotional responses. At the core of this phenomenon lies the prefrontal cortex, an area of the brain responsible for rational thought and decision-making. When it comes to social interactions, the prefrontal cortex plays a crucial role in evaluating social cues, predicting outcomes, and modulating our emotional reactions. However, as neuroscientist Dr. Marco Iacoboni points out, this region of the brain is still under development during adolescence, a period when many young people are particularly drawn to video games. This immaturity in the prefrontal cortex means that gamers, especially younger ones, might not always be able to assess the social implications of their actions in a virtual environment. They might not fully grasp how their behavior might be perceived by others, or the potential consequences of their actions. Moving deeper into the brain, we encounter the limbic system, a collection of structures responsible for processing emotions and memories. Within this system lies the amygdala, a region that plays a key role in our response to fear and anxiety. Research suggests that the amygdala activates in anticipation of social rejection, a fundamental human fear rooted in our evolutionary past. In other words, the amygdala sets off alarm bells in response to perceived social threats, whether real or imagined. This activation is significantly amplified in individuals with social anxiety disorder, a condition characterized by an intense fear of social situations. For gamers with social anxiety, the fear of being judged or humiliated in a social setting is likely to spill over into the virtual world. As a result, the amygdala might overreact to perceived social dangers in games, leading to heightened feelings of shame and embarrassment. Finally, we must consider the reward centers of the brain, areas that are activated when we experience pleasure or anticipate a reward. Neuroscientists have found that these reward centers are closely linked to the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation and desire. When we engage in activities that bring pleasure, such as playing video games, our brain's reward centers light up, signaling the release of dopamine. This is what makes video games so enjoyable. They provide a fun, engaging distraction from the demands of everyday life. However, this same reward circuit can contribute to feelings of shame when we fail to perform well or achieve our goals in a game. The activation of the reward centers and the release of dopamine are abruptly cut short, leaving us feeling disappointed and inadequate. In a sense, the brain's reward centers play a significant role in amplifying our feelings of shame when we fail to meet our expectations or those set by our competitors in a game. By understanding the interplay between the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and reward centers of the brain, we begin to unravel the complex neurological dance that leads to shame in gamers. It's a reminder of the intricate and deeply ingrained nature of our emotional responses in the digital age. Love this video? Awesome! Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and check out the next one in the series right here. You won't want to miss it.